Estamos aqui para dar voz ao povo. Em defesa dos cidadãos. Pela dignidade humana. Todos temos deveres, mas também todos temos direitos. Será que existe justiça? Isto é o povo a falar. Muito boa noite e bem-vindo a mais um Isto é o Povo Falar. Estou consigo todos os dias, de segunda a sexta-feira, neste mesmo horário, emissão em simultâneo Curiacos TV e na Rádio Vida 97.1. E o programa de hoje é um programa especial. Vamos analisar precisamente a comunicação social, vamos olhar para a forma como as notícias nos têm sido apresentadas, mas vamos falar com alguém também especial por causa da sua carreira. Jornalista de profissão, foi apresentador no canal norte-americano Fox News e foi o fundador e é também apresentador do canal de YouTube Redacted, que tem já para cima de 2 milhões de seguidores e apresenta as notícias, dando o outro lado da notícia, obrigando-o a si e a mim a pensar realmente naquilo que são as manchetes que abrem os telejornais ou vemos espelhadas nos jornais diários. O nosso convidado de hoje é o Clayton Morris e a entrevista vai ser em inglês. Good evening, Clayton.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Muito obrigado. I understood about 50% of what you just said.
Well, 50% is not bad. Is not bad.
But to speak it back, it would not be.
Thank you so much for being here. I was pointing out to our viewers and also to the listeners of the radio program that what we are going to talk about today is actually the strength that mainstream media has on formatting the ideas that our society has on this issue or that issue. But first, let's go historically, trying to understand the importance of media to let people know what's going on.
If you look back historically at media, newspapers particularly in the United States, they were always an extension of rich people, right? They were funded by wealthy Americans. And so I always say on our show, follow the money. And when you see headlines, you pick up your newspapers, we always want to wonder who backs these pieces of newspaper? Where is the money coming from? The messages that are being presented to people. What is the message? Is it truly to just get out information? Is it truly just to get out non-biased information? Or is there propaganda behind it? Is there some larger incentive to push people in a certain way, whether it's on war or the economy or digital identification or COVID, vaccines, all of that?
Presidential candidates.
Presidential candidates. Who is being elevated on the front pages of newspapers and who is being downgraded, hidden? I'll just give you an example. There's a television network in the United States called MSNBC, which is an extension of NBC. And a producer who worked at MSNBC was a whistleblower and admitted that she was told they were not allowed to feature certain candidates on their show. Bernie Sanders, there was a couple of other candidates. When they would put up graphics on the screen, on the TV screen, they would show Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, but oddly missing or very, very small print on the screen, Bernie Sanders. And so why is that? Who was telling these producers that you can't show these candidates? They're all running. They were all Democratic candidates. In fact, Bernie Sanders was beating Kamala Harris in the polls. Why can't you talk about him? Why can't he be a guest on the show? So media, when people flip on their televisions, they see CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. These are the main sources of information. The New York Times, the Washington Post. And all of it is funded by these big corporate media. So it's very, very difficult now for us to get out real information to the independent media. Independent media, what we do, is under siege. So we try to navigate that and navigate through the propaganda and try to see what are the real messages being sold to people and try to get the truth out.
And I have to agree with you, because if you remember, Bernie Sanders did very well in the primaries against Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So he was, although they call him a grandfather, because of age issue, but that's not an issue for Biden, for instance.
Right, right. And we know from leaked emails, we know from Hillary Clinton's leaked emails and the Democratic National Convention, the Democratic National Committee's leaked emails, that it was an intentional sabotage of Bernie Sanders. And I'm not sitting here as any kind of Bernie Sanders supporter, but I'm pointing out the hypocrisy of corporate media trying to silence voices and elevating Joe Biden and collaborating together to come together and say, let's elevate Joe Biden. Let's put him together as the candidate. He's the guy that we can control. We'll suppress Bernie Sanders. We will suppress these other candidates, keep them hidden. We will go out of our way to hurt Green Party candidates, keep them off the ballot in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and other states. Intentional targeting of candidates to keep them off. So we know from the leaked emails from the DNC that it was an intentional sabotage of Bernie Sanders. I remember asking Donna Brazile, I was at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia when that story broke, and I asked her that very question, and she then took over as head of the DNC, and she didn't have answers. She was stumbling around, and it was all very, very secretive, but there was a targeted campaign for them to try to silence certain candidates. And the mainstream media is silent about it.
And another thing that many of us that are a little bit more, pay a little bit more attention to this, is that the stories that they don't follow up. And let's start with Hillary Clinton's, for instance, the emails. Hillary Clinton was subpoenaed. She had time to clean the computer. She had time to format the computer or whatever. And then she presented it to the commission. That same year or the year before, there was a officer of the United States Army that had been, how do you call it, disbanded? Expelled because of using his own personal email to send a message to himself.
Right.
But Hillary Clinton used his own personal email with classified documents.
This speaks to the double standard in American politics. And if you play the game, you will be protected. If you play the game, you will be protected. So if you are Hillary Clinton, and you allow the extension of the deep state, the expansion of the military-industrial complex, you play the game, those people will protect you. If you don't play the game, they will come after you. And in the case of Donald Trump, we see that. And by all accounts, she should be, if we're holding her to the same standards as Donald Trump, he now has, what, 1,500 indictments? I think last night there was a new indictment for Donald Trump. Every day there's a new indictment. He's going to prison. He's going mugshots. By that standard, where are the indictments for Hillary Clinton? If we have equal justice under the law, why is Hillary Clinton not hauled before Congress and demanded these same answers, or a mugshot of Hillary Clinton? Instead, yesterday, Hillary Clinton's national portrait was unveiled. She got to stand there next to a big painting of herself and make jabs at Putin, make jabs at Donald Trump. So instead we elevate people like that who are willing to play the game and play the deep state game. And you can see now when you speak out against the deep state, when you call attention to it, they will come after you.
And the worst of it is that if you follow up this story, then you get into Libya, you get into Benghazi, you need to get into America interference in a sovereign nation, right?
Right. And so if Hillary Clinton, if you look at her championing, although she tries to say that it was President Obama's decision really to go into Libya. But of
she
course,
was Secretary of
yeah,
State.
but she was the champion of it. And of course, famously, she said, joking about learning that Gaddafi had been killed by the United States, that targeted by the United States. We came, we saw, we killed him, she joked. We came, we saw, he died, I think was the joke that she said. And she laughed about it and joked about it. And this is Hillary Clinton. This is the true Hillary Clinton, wanting to, a warmonger. That's the way I describe Hillary Clinton. When someone asks me, what do you think of Hillary Clinton? I say warmonger.
Mm-hmm. And somebody that actually, the only thing she didn't get was the presidency, but she was the first lady.
Right.
She was a senator. She was Secretary of State. She went through all the, not talking about Hillary Clinton, but one of the stories that it looks like the media follow up, but they didn't like the conclusion, was the Russia collusion in the elections.
Yesterday, she brought it up again, Hillary Clinton. So to go back to Hillary Clinton, again, we can't get away from Hillary Clinton. She's standing there unveiling her portrait and brings up Russian collusion again. She's in an interview over the past 48 hours talking about Russia will try to collude and interfere in the 2024 election, just like they did because she lost the election. And I don't know if anyone's told her that that's been disproven and that it was orchestrated inside of Washington, and she is a part of that process, that it came from her own office to put out this false story. But none of the journalists are sitting there when she's interacting with them will ask her this tough question. Excuse me, Madam Secretary, but this came right from your own office. This was propaganda created by you to try to discredit Donald Trump and say that he was colluding with the Russian government, colluding with the Kremlin. But no one challenges her on it because the media is all in the tank. For the liberal corporate media wants that, wants her to be elevated, most Americans now understand this. Most Americans see through it. I think the American media has an approval rating somewhere around, someone can fact check me on this, but I think it's like 23%.
Oh,
certain viruses have a higher approval rating than the American media. So yeah, certain terminal illnesses have a higher approval rating than the American media. So that's why Americans are searching for other alternatives, searching for other voices, searching for independent media to get their answers because of this propaganda.
And then we will go on also the struggles of independent media, because it's like David against Goliath in some situations. Another story that when it broke, we were almost anxious to see some names, was the Epstein, the Jeffrey Epstein. But no flight logs, no more photos on the Lolita Express, no names of other people that have been there.
When you realize the deep state, and he was just an asset of the deep state, I've interviewed on my show many, many times Whitney Webb, who's an amazing journalist. She's written multiple volumes on Jeffrey Epstein. And it's not, as she likes to remind our audience, it's not just about Jeffrey Epstein. It's about Jeffrey Epstein's connections to the intelligence, the intelligence apparatus, right? The CIA, the FBI, and those relationships that he's had for years. I think over the past 24 hours, we had revelations about the intelligence community having funded, paying in part to own part of his Upper East Side house. So there's a relationship there, similar to the FBI as a roommate, one of the 9/11 hijackers in Los Angeles. So why is the intelligence community providing an apartment for Jeffrey Epstein? We should all be questioning this. And if you question it, of course, you're silenced when you question it. We just saw over the past 48 hours in the Virgin Islands that JP Morgan Chase will settle a lawsuit in the Virgin Islands about Epstein transactions. So JP Morgan Chase, instead of going to trial, instead of us learning more information, learning names, learning about how these transactions unfolded, learning about why they were allowing these financial transactions for Jeffrey Epstein to unfold, knowing of the sexual allegations in his past, Why were they allowing this to happen? They'll settle the lawsuit, so we never hear about it. Silence, we won't hear about it. Why was he killed in prison? Why were cameras turned off? Why was all of this allowed to happen? But we can't question it.
And actually, as far as I remember, they told that he was on suicide watch, or somebody told that be careful because he may be suicidal. So it's...
Michael Baden, who examined the body, examined the autopsy of Jeffrey Epstein, concluded it was homicide. Michael Baden, I've interviewed many, many times, one of the sharpest criminal minds in America, one of the greatest forensic pathologists in American history, says that he was killed. So who are you going to believe? The mainstream media with their fake narrative, or forensic pathologists who've examined the mysterious nature of Jeffrey Epstein suddenly dying and cameras are turned off? Imagine that in the time period when he's...
I think it's easier to win the lottery, you know?
Right.
Just to have the cameras off exactly when...
At the exact moment when this happens. It's unbelievable how that happens.
Another story, this has been leaking for years. This is nothing new, but it's nothing that actually mainstream wanted to follow on it, is Hunter Biden and eventual connections of Hunter Biden businesses with or benefiting allegedly Joe Biden.
But this is the great story. The Hunter Biden story is the great story because it's about Hunter Biden, but it's about Vice President Joe Biden at the time. And that's why the FBI and the CIA had gone to great lengths to silence this story. If you think about why would they silence a story about Joe Biden, well, look at Joe Biden right now. He is essentially an empty suit that's being propped up and moved around like a pawn on a chessboard. And they get to use him to do their bidding. Send more money and weapons to Ukraine, extend and send more money and weapons to Syria, extend military bases around the world. We just invited in the Cook Islands. We add military bases there. We have 950 military bases around the world, the United States does. So Joe Biden is a vessel for the CIA, the deep state, and the military-industrial complex to use to do their bidding. And so covering up the story about his corruption is vital to their survival. And Hunter Biden, the story, again, was never about Hunter Biden. It was about Vice President Biden's connections and corruption. All you need to do is watch Vice President Biden on camera admitting that he was going to have the top prosecutor in Ukraine fired, and then bragging about having the prosecutor fired because that prosecutor was looking into his son and his corrupt business dealings in Ukraine under Burisma. And then that prosecutor suddenly is fired. No one is allowed to talk about this. And when Facebook started to see the story of Hunter Biden and the laptop show up on their platform, Mark Zuckerberg gets a knock on the door from the FBI that says, "You're going to start to see stories about Hunter Biden's laptop. We encourage you to suppress this story, block it on social media, keep it hidden."
And those stories came with the pictures, videos,
Yes.
transcriptions. So there's a body of allegedly evidence that I'm surprised nobody goes after it.
Well, certain journalists did. Miranda Devine at the New York Post vetted the story, confirmed the authenticity of the Hunter Biden emails, confirmed the veracity of the laptop, that it was in fact his laptop, confirmed all of the forensics of the emails to know that they were in fact authentic, just like any good journalist would do, just like Glenn Greenwald did when he confirmed Edward Snowden's emails and all of the data from the NSA. You confirm all of it forensically, and even Glenn Greenwald at the time confirmed. The way in which Miranda Devine confirmed the story is the way that I confirmed it with Edward Snowden. So Miranda Devine had the story, published the New York Post story, then the FBI and the intelligence state went to social media and told them to silence the story. And if you posted the story, you were blocked on Twitter, you were blocked on Facebook, it was deranked and you couldn't see it. So it was there, they knew it was there. And then a few years later, finally the New York Times admits that yes, it was true, the emails were accurate, the laptop did belong to Hunter Biden. It was, and then CBS did, and Washington Post confirmed it later years.
Do you think it's time also for users and the people in general that use social media to get the social media accountable for their actions also? As they want to make us accountable for our own actions or our own posts.
Well, I don't know how you do that. I mean, the problem is they're private companies, right? So YouTube, for instance, has its own terms of service as a private company. And they can change their terms of service overnight.
Yeah.
So Twitter, in the past 48 hours, of course, the new CEO of Twitter, which is now X, sheesh.
Sheesh.
It's funny, it's sheesh, because in English it's like sheesh, sheesh. But that's really what. So now the new CEO of Sheesh is a former World Economic Forum person, right? And so she has come out over the past 48 hours and said that we will allow free speech, but if it's awful speech, it will basically be suppressed. Well, who is to determine what's awful? Yeah. Awful to her? So we're really letting it up to these social media companies to tell us what is awful. And what is their then political agenda? You think it's awful, but I might find it really valuable or important.
Well, if you go to gastronomy, some people like some type of food, right, and it's wonderful. And others may say, well, that's awful, I don't like it. So it's...
I mean, let me just role play a little bit. Let's say she's a vegan, okay? So to her, it might be awful if I promote eating meat. But I might find it awful that she's promoting veganism because it's all processed food and uses seed oils. So we have a difference of opinion. Who's to say what's awful? Mm-hmm. So these social media companies have really become the arbiters of what they deem as truth.
But we thought that Twitter was safe now after the takeover from Elon.
There's been a lot of forensics done from journalists that I support and really believe in, who've called out a lot of inconsistencies and hypocrisy within the new Twitter. Mm-hmm. Certain stories that have been blocked, certain accounts that have been banned, certain journalists questioning certain things which have found their accounts blocked and banned. So maybe we can give Elon Musk the benefit of the doubt because it's been 9 months, 10 months?
It's better than it was before.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember who was the CEO of Twitter. I don't know
Jack Dorsey, yeah.
I don't know if I wanted him as a friend because you know the story how he took over from a friend that had the idea. And then he just, I think he betrayed that friend, but it's well known, that story, for those that look for it. But another thing that we are seeing, and my problem is that what happens in the United States, normally in the West, is then a trend to other nations, is the weaponization or using the tools of the state as weapons against political adversaries. Is that something, new and it worries you?
I don't know that it's new. I think it's been around for decades, and I think the United States, I think here's the thing. If you ask most Americans, do you want your government opening up 950 military bases around the world? I think most Americans would say absolutely not. Most Americans probably don't even know that because it's kept quiet. If you asked most Americans, do you want your government bullying other countries, going into Syria, Yemen, Somalia? We've gotten word at Redacted what's about to happen in Haiti. The United States is about to carry out something terrible in Haiti. And we're going to report on that later on our show. And so do most Americans want that? No. They absolutely don't want that. Most Americans would say the $1 trillion that you're spending on the military and sending out, you said weaponization of information or pushing it out to the rest of the world, taking that $1 trillion that they spend, imagine if they invested it back in America, in American schools, in American roads, American bridges, factories, rail infrastructure. America has outsourced just about everything now. I think most Americans would say, please stop spending this money on military bases and this weaponization of democracy. You know, this is how they do it. They like to say we need to spread democracy around the world, and the way that we do it is we do it with a boot. You know, we're gonna kick you. You know, we're gonna spread democracy through our weapons. How's that working out for us? Right? That was the justification for NATO in Ukraine. We need to continue. We need to spread democracy, and the way that we do that is we send you weapons. And you're right to use the term weaponization, because that's exactly what it is. And imagine if it was done another way. I like to imagine what America would look like if it slashed its military budget and reinvested that money back at home, shut the military bases. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he would shut all these military bases.
Well, how many mainstream media have interviewed Robert Kennedy Jr.?
Almost none. And he has run almost his entire campaign now through independent media. Now, I don't believe the deep state in the United States will allow Robert F. Kennedy to become president. I've said it on my show, I'll say it here again. I don't think that they will allow Donald Trump to become president, and I don't think the CIA and the deep state will allow Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to become president of the United States. And so they really do not want him to be. He wants to shut all of the military bases. He wants to get rid of the intelligence. He wants to shut down basically the CIA that was responsible for what happened to his uncle, JFK. And I think that I really believe that he, if he was going to have interviews, it's mostly done right now through independent media. That's it.
Another thing that is, it worries is when you use certain extensions of government to attack other adversaries. For instance, using the DOJ against Trump, using the IRS against some associations, civil associations that defended the Constitution, or using the FBI, for instance, also against other candidates. Is this more worrisome?
Incredibly worrisome. The weaponization of the Department of Justice against your political allies. So that's exactly what's happened. Using the Department of Justice to go after your political rivals. It's supposed to be impartial. It's supposed to be separate. The Attorney General under President Biden is supposed to be separate from the Biden administration, but we've clearly seen that it's not. Using the Department of Justice to go after political rivals while not prosecuting people like Hunter Biden, looking the other way, using the Internal Revenue Service in the United States. For your audience, you know, the IRS is the mechanism that goes after people for not paying taxes. And so using the IRS, we've seen it during the Obama years to go after conservatives.
That's true.
You know? And so specifically, I think it was run out of the Cincinnati office in Cincinnati, Ohio, where they targeted conservative campaign groups using names in their titles like freedom and other things. If you used freedom or had Constitution, they would go after you. So the IRS was being used to go after conservative groups.
And just to remember and to give some context to the people, there was one of these groups that was raided, persecuted, and then the businesses of the people that run the group was also raided, investigated. And the worst of it is that you could see the one that gave the instruction, because Cummings was the vice president of the committee that was investigating this.
Right. Yes. And it's you can't even make this up. It's laughable, but you know exactly what the motivation was in order to silence these voices, in order to silence your political critics. And so using the IRS to do this, to facilitate shutting them down, so they can't run television ads, they couldn't run newspaper ads, and that silences those voices, and it elevated President Obama, it elevated liberals, and Democratic candidates, because they were targeting and shut them down. You're shutting down speech.
Another interesting thing that is as, how can I say, as, as funny as the death of Epstein is, the person that was investigating, for instance, the Russia collusion in the campaign was somebody, FBI agent called Peter Strzok. I think that's the way they say their name. And you can actually, on the transcripts, know that he hated Trump, and he was saying that we must stop him at the same time that he was investigating.
Well, we've now had confirmation not only of that, yes, and there was other members of the FBI that were then investigated separately for their emails and saying we need to go after him, and the FBI has promised us, though, that they've cleaned house of that, right? But we know from whistleblower testimony over the past couple of months that, in fact, no, they're not doing that. There are whistleblowers that continue to come forward at the FBI who very bravely come forward, testified before Congress, and have had their lives ruined as a result of it. Who've come forward and admitted that the FBI is being used, it's being weaponized. Different field offices had been weaponized and used, and they were told to look the other way on certain stories, on Hunter Biden specifically. We've had whistleblowers from the IRS coming forward now admitting that they were told to drop it when looking into Hunter Biden and his tax avoidance, those people that were involved in that investigation. So what more do you need? We have whistleblowers coming forward who worked in the FBI admitting that this is the case. They're being told what to do. They're being told to look the other way if it's a certain political candidate, and they're being told to prosecute or really go after it. And in fact, not just go after it, find whatever you can, even if you have to invent it, basically. Dig deep and manufacture it. In a way, and that's really the troubling. So there's nothing there, but no, you really need to you need to go after it hard and find something. They were told, quote, find something. It reminds me of it's a political witch hunt is what it is.
When I was about to say something in Portuguese, but when we look at the situation now with Trump, with the DOJ going after him, the classified documents, but already news have came out from other sources saying that Vice President Biden had the same amount or more classified documents in his own house. My question is, do Americans really believe they choose their own president?
That's a great question. I think increasingly more and more Americans realize that it's rigged and that it's rigged and stacked against them, which is why I say I don't believe they will allow Donald Trump to become president, even if he is winning in the polls. They will do whatever they can to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think a lot of Americans were questioning, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that Joe Biden received the most amount of votes in American history? How did that happen? 80 million people voted for Joe Biden when you would go to campaign rallies and they were fairly empty. And then you would look and see Donald Trump and there was thousands of people. And Joe Biden had a record amount of people that voted for him. We now know voter fraud occurred. There was many inconsistencies, voter fraud accusations and confirmations in multiple states. So I think Americans have a real fear. Americans used to believe that the election cycle in America was the freest, the fairest. We would send election representatives to other parts of the world. Americans would send election representatives to Iraq, and other places. We're going to go there and watch your election to make sure that it's safe. We're going to put eyes on your elections to make sure that it's safe. Really? When we in the United States realize there's ballots showing up in the dark of night in vans, electronic.
And the mail votes
Yes,
that really didn't add up.
So I don't think Americans, I think a group, maybe 30%, maybe believe that, oh yeah, it's all fine, there's no problems. But I think most Americans now realize there's something big going on.
Do you think that next year it's going to be a critical year for the United States?
I'll be honest, yeah.
Hence, for all of us?
I think for all of us, I'm very worried about this next election cycle. I think America is a nation in massive decline, and I think my wife and I like to joke that desperate people do desperate things when they're backed into a corner, and I think that America is in a desperate position right now, and I think this next election cycle is for me very scary. I grew up reading American history books and having great reverence for the Revolutionary War and studying all of that. And I think we're in a very dark period in the United States right now. And there's lots of talk of what happens on Election Day could lead us into a civil war, especially if there's captured, voting irregularities in the United States. So I'm very, very worried about this next election cycle.
And just for the people to understand, because in Portugal, the system is different regarding the votes. There are videos of people giving the mail-in
ballots.
Mail ballots, and telling the people, don't forget, this is your candidate, vote for this one. Mm-hmm. This is election interference.
Yes, but the Americans will go around, like I said, we'll fly to Iraq, we'll fly to other countries and tell you how to run your elections. So this is the hypocrisy of the United States election process. There's not only videos of people telling you how to vote, there's videos of van loads of documents, of ballots showing up in the dark of night. Suddenly, when one particular candidate was lower or winning, so Donald Trump was winning, and then after midnight, suddenly a truck full of ballots show up. It's caught on video, we see it in video, and then right after those ballots arrive, they're checked in, and then suddenly Joe Biden's number shoots up in the polls, in the ballot, in the election. So there's been plenty of inconsistencies and fraud that's surfaced as it relates to the 2020 election. And even though you'll have people in the Biden administration and the deep state say it was the safest election in American history. Really? What about this evidence? But no one wants to look into it. And you're called a conspiracy theorist if you raise questions about it. And here's another thing. You are prevented from talking about it on YouTube. You're prevented from talking about it on social media. If you read YouTube's terms of service, it says it in black and white. Any of your viewers can go and read YouTube's terms of service, their community guidelines. And in their community guidelines, it says you cannot say that the 2020 election, that there was fraud or inconsistencies in the 2020 election.
Even inconsistencies, you cannot say it.
No, I mean, I don't know exact language today as of this.
But it's specific for the 2020.
Yeah, but you can say 2016. You can say 2016 there were inconsistencies because that's pro-Hillary. You also can't talk about the recent Brazilian election and talk about inconsistencies in Brazil. You can't talk about that on YouTube.
2016 was fair and square. People were not, they didn't really believe that Trump could win.
Right, but if you listen to Hillary Clinton, that Russia caused her to lose the election. She still says that today, that Russia caused her to lose and Donald Trump to win.
How come? Mainstream media always showed double-digit Hillary ahead.
Right. And I don't think anyone believed that she was going to lose that election.
You know how many planes need to fly from Moscow to Washington in order to vote, to turn around the results?
Right. It's absurd. But on YouTube's terms of service, you can talk all you want about 2016 being a fraudulent election and that Hillary Clinton should have won. Under their terms of service, you can say that. If you bring up the 2020 election, they will demonetize your channel. They will remove your videos from YouTube. So this is how it works. You know what side YouTube is on. You know what side the social media companies are on. They don't want you to talk about 2020. They're fine talking about Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Let's go a little bit on the difference also that we can see in the media from the United States to Europe, more here to Portugal, is that in Portugal you can understand, if you pay attention, that this platform or that platform in the media supports this party or that other party. In the United States, it's different. They say who they support. They endorse candidates. But I don't know if you can talk about it, but I'll make the question. There was something happened at Fox. Fox was the conservative outlet, Republican outlet, but in some given moment, Fox decided that they don't want nothing of that and lost a little bit, if I may say so, the type of people that were the everyday viewers.
So I think you may be referring to Tucker Carlson, who was unceremoniously fired a few months ago, one of the leading voices on Fox. He had the 8 o'clock at night show, Tucker Carlson Tonight. He's a dear friend of mine. He was unceremoniously fired because, in my opinion, a couple of things. Number one, he was the only anti-war host, presenter on television in all of the mainstream media, questioning the Ukraine war, questioning NATO's enlargement and provocation of the war. You can't say that. Can't say that. In American mainstream media, you have to be all in the tank for NATO. That's one thing. So Fox, I think, went through, after we realized that BlackRock bought up a huge amount of shares of Fox News Corporation, suddenly you saw a shift. So I believe it was February or the end of January that BlackRock bought or extended its large shareholder position in Fox News. And then a short time later, Tucker does a show where he blasts and talks about BlackRock buying up most of Ukraine. You can't do that. So that's like saying your employer is buying up most of Ukraine. That's essentially what he said or admitted to. And then a short time later, he's gone. He's gone and eliminated. And so, if you again follow the money, it's not hard to see that the low-level management at Fox is just doing the bidding of their largest shareholders. That's just follow the money. That's how you get this change.
And one of the things that if you follow the money nowadays, you will find three corporations: BlackRock, Vanguard, and some other one that I don't remember the name.
Right.
Can we actually say that we live in a free society, a democratic society, or whatever, if just three players have control of the food, control of transportation, and then control of the media also?
No. They can tell you what you can eat. They can tell you what you can farm. They can come and take away your chickens. They can come and tell you that you can't use, in the European Union, you can't use cash beyond a certain threshold anymore to pay your gardener, to pay your landscaper, to pay for groceries. If it reaches a certain threshold, the European Union will tell you no. We're moving towards a digital ID.
They say it's because of terrorism.
Oh, it's terrorism. Yeah, that only terrorists use cash, which is absolutely hilarious, right? But it's terrorists that we need to worry about. No, it's about control. It's about control. They want to control you. And wake up. People need to wake up. It's not about terrorism, but they will use that as the umbrella to describe we're going into Iraq, we're going to Afghanistan because of terrorism. It's not at all about that. It's about oil, it's about resources, it's about stealing Syria's oil. It's about going into Western Africa and stealing resources and minerals and uranium and everything else we can get our hands on.
This may be a little bit stretched, but what we live now in 2023, this is the dream of some guy in the 40s that was born in Austria and then ruled over Germany, because it's control everything, including schools and what is taught or not at schools. And also the changing of history, and since you are a history savant, I don't know if it worries you also this need to change history in order to back up some type of narrative.
It's incredibly troubling. You're going to remove statues, you're going to remove or throw away books, eliminate information. The Canadian Parliament tried to vote over the past 48 hours to change the official record of what just happened. They had a literal Nazi in Parliament being applauded by all of Parliament. Trudeau's government tried to get it erased from the historical record to say that it didn't happen. And so when you would look through the parliamentary record years from now, it would just be a blank spot. There'd be, oh, that didn't happen. So it's really the whitewashing of history. It's incredibly troubling. And I always think when we study history, one of my great history professors at the University of Pittsburgh always told me, when you read a piece of history, always start in the front of the book and look at the date the book was printed, and also look at the publisher of the book and try to understand the context when this was written. What year was this written? Who was the publisher? Who stood to make money off the publication of this book?
Follow the money.
Follow the money, but question everything. But I think the changing of history is incredibly troubling.
Regarding Canada, well, there was never a time as finest for their own anthem, "O Canada." We don't really know what's going on. But just spend a few minutes on Trudeau, because Portugal has a large amount of immigrants there. Trudeau is probably one of the most dangerous leaders that there is, and people don't really understand this.
They don't. And, you know, I think he really is the epitome of what we try to cover here on our show on Redacted, which is the rise of fascism, the rise of a totalitarian state, censorship, control, the demonization of your political opponents, calling them white supremacists or fascists or terrorists, I mean, as they labeled the trucker convoy. Justin Trudeau is a World Economic Forum, a Klaus Schwab protege. He is, in Klaus Schwab's own words, a stellar student, right? He is who they hoped to install in governments. If Klaus Schwab could pick his favorite protege, it would be Justin Trudeau. He's publicly said this. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, another one of those young World Economic Forum proteges who's then installed in a government and is able to put in place all of these World Economic Forum plans, these globalist plans for control, whether it's around currency, digital ID, telling you what you can eat, what's in schools, education.
Do you really think that the people, the public in general, understand that there are names behind these things? Because you mentioned Schwab, George Soros, for instance.
George Soros, exactly. Again, I don't know. I hope that more and more people are waking up. The people that watch this program are listening and then saying, wait a second, what does that name mean? And you're going and you're doing research and you're studying what Klaus Schwab's history is, the very, very dark history of this man. And you start to understand the platform. Just go to the World Economic Forum's website. It's not conspiracy. Go read their own website. And you can read it right there on their platform. We featured the world. So Klaus Schwab, of course, the head of the World Economic Forum, we the other night on our show went through and described how they're getting people to eat insects and how the World Economic Forum really wants you to stop eating meat and they really want you to start eating crickets. And how do you say crickets in
Grilos.
Okay.
Grilo.
So that's instead of no sardinhas? No.
Eu também não, porque eu não gosto de sardinhas.
Eu gosto de sardinhas.
But maybe X will tell me if sardines are good or not.
Because you need social media to tell you whether or not it's good. And they control Google search results. The United Nations admits to the search results on being controlled by the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. So I just hope people wake up. They realize where this information is coming from.
Thank you so much, Clayton. I think
you.
that's a great way to end the show. We just hope that people wake up
Yes.
and take control of their own lives. Muito obrigado a si que nos acompanhou em mais um Isto é o Povo a Falar. Estamos de regresso para mais um programa. Resto de boa noite. Obrigado.